You're thinking about something that happened years ago. Maybe it was a summer, maybe it was a place, maybe it was a version of your life that, if you're honest with yourself, wasn't actually that great. You were broke, or you were lonely, or you were anxious almost every day. But right now, your brain is playing it back like it was the best thing that ever happened to you, and you do almost anything to go back. Why does that happen? Why does the brain lie to you about your own past? And why does nostalgia feel like grief for something you never even fully enjoyed while you had it?
Here's the weird thing about nostalgia. It's not really about the past, it's about right now. Researchers at the University of Southampton, one of the leading groups studying nostalgia scientifically, found that people are most likely to feel nostalgic when they feel disconnected, lonely, or like their current life lacks meaning. In other words, your brain doesn't randomly decide to replay 2015. It reaches for the past because something about today feels off. And that's where it starts to get strange, because nostalgia doesn't require the past to have been good. It just requires the past to feel more real, more defined than whatever you're standing in right now. Dr. Konstantin Sedekidis, a psychologist at Southampton who has spent over 2 decades studying nostalgia, describes it as a bittersweet emotion that is predominantly positive, not purely happy. Bittersweet. That's the key word. Because here's what bittersweet actually means neurologically. Your brain processed the past. It has edges. It has an ending. It has meaning. Your present doesn't have that yet. So your brain does something fascinating and a little manipulative. It edits.
Let's start with something most people get wrong about memory. Memory is not a recording. It is not a hard drive. It is not a photograph. It is not even a movie you've stored somewhere in your head. Memory is a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain rebuilds it from scratch, using fragments, context clues, and your current emotional state to fill in the blanks. Neuroscientist Elizabeth Loftus at UC Irvine has spent decades proving this in labs. Her famous false memory studies showed that you can implant memories into people that never happened, just by asking the right questions in the right way. People remembered events with vivid detail, sensory detail, emotional detail, events that objectively did not occur.
Your nostalgic memories operate on the same principle. You are not misremembering on purpose. Your brain is doing what it always does when it reconstructs a memory. It samples your current emotional state and uses it as a filter. When you're anxious, uncertain, or disconnected right now, your brain reconstructs the past through a lens of warmth. Not because the past was warm, because you need it to be.
There is a psychological phenomenon called the fading affect bias, and it is maybe the single biggest reason why your past seems better than it was. Here's the short version. Negative emotions from past events fade from memory faster than positive emotions. The discomfort of being broke at 23 fades. The joy of a spontaneous road trip, even a cheap, chaotic one, lingers. This has been documented consistently across multiple studies. Researchers Walker, Vogl, and Thompson published foundational findings on this in the 1990s, showing that pleasant events maintain their emotional charge in memory, while unpleasant ones progressively lose intensity over time. Later studies confirm this holds even for relationship memories. You forget the arguments. You forget the distance. What your brain holds onto is the feeling of being known by someone. The result is a kind of temporal illusion. The longer ago something happened, the more the negative emotions have faded, and the more disproportionately positive it seems. So when you're nostalgic for college, you're not nostalgic for the all-nighters and the financial stress and the relationship drama. You're nostalgic for the emotional residue that survived the fade, which is mostly freedom, connection, feeling like everything was still possible.
Here's where the science gets actually surprising. Nostalgia, despite its reputation as something passive or even a little sad, is a functional psychological mechanism. Your brain isn't broken when it does this. It's doing its job. In 2006, researchers Wildschut, Sidikidis, Arndt, and Routledge published a landmark paper in the Journal of Personality and Sociopsychology. They found that nostalgia consistently increases feelings of social connectedness, self-continuity, and meaning in life, even when the nostalgic memory involves difficult events. Read that again. Even when the memory involves difficult events. Because nostalgia isn't really about the event, it's about identity. When you remember who you were, even a version of you that was struggling, your brain is doing something important. It's stitching together a continuous self. It's saying, you were someone then. You are someone now. There is a thread.
Psychologists call this self-continuity, the sense that the person you are now is meaningfully connected to the person you were. And self-continuity turns out to be deeply tied to psychological well-being. When people lose that sense, when their past feels foreign or disconnected, they tend to feel more lost. Nostalgia is your brain's way of maintaining the thread. Clay Routledge, a social psychologist who has published extensively on nostalgia at Northwood University, describes nostalgia as a kind of existential resource, something people draw on when they feel their sense of purpose is under threat, which explains why nostalgia spikes during certain life moments, transitions, losses, anniversaries, Sunday evenings, times when the present feels unfinished and the past feels whole.
Nostalgia wasn't always considered a normal emotion. For a period of time, it was classified as a disease. In 1688, Swiss physician Johannes Hofer coined the term nostalgia, combining the Greek words nostos, meaning return home, and algos, meaning pain or longing. He used it to describe a syndrome he observed in Swiss mercenary soldiers fighting far from home. Symptoms included persistent melancholy, weeping, irregular heartbeat, indigestion, and in severe cases, fever. He believed it was caused by the unceasing vibration of animal spirits through those fibers of the middle brain in which impressed traces of ideas of the fatherland still cling, which is, in his era's scientific language, roughly, your brain is stuck on home and it's making you physically sick. Nostalgia was treated medically well into the 1800s. During the American Civil War, Union Army medical records documented hundreds of cases of nostalgia as an official diagnosis among soldiers, particularly young men far from home for the first time. Some were sent home, others were treated with opium. It wasn't until the 20th century that nostalgia was reframed, from pathology to psychology, from a disease to an emotion, from something that happens to you to something your brain does for you. There's a version of nostalgia that isn't just personal, it's collective, and it operates by a very specific psychological rule. Researchers have identified what's called the reminiscence bump, a well-documented phenomenon in memory research. The reminiscence bump describes the finding that adults most vividly remember events from their adolescence and early adulthood, roughly ages 10 to 25, compared to any other life period. David Pillamer at the University of New Hampshire and other memory researchers have studied this extensively. The leading explanation? These years are when your identity is being formed. Everything is more emotionally intense. The firsts are happening. First love, first heartbreak, first real friendship, first taste of independence. Your brain encodes them more deeply because they mattered more to who you were becoming. This is why entire generations feel nostalgic for the same era. Millennials and their relationship with the early 2000s, Gen X and the 80s. It's not that those eras were objectively better. It's that those eras coincided with the ages when those generations were becoming who they are. The reminiscence bump turns personal memory into cultural mythology. And industries know this. The nostalgia economy, the deliberate marketing of reboot films, retro product packaging, vintage aesthetics is not accidental. It is a calculated activation of your brain's most reliable emotional trigger. Here's the reframe, and it's kind of a big one. You are not nostalgic for the past. You are nostalgic for who you were in relation to the future. Think about it. When you think about being 19 or 22 or whatever age your brain keeps returning to, what is the actual feeling underneath it? Is it the specific events, the specific people, or is it the openness? The feeling that things hadn't been decided yet, that you hadn't made the choices that narrowed the path, that almost anything was still theoretically possible. Psychologists describe this as anticipated regret and counterfactual thinking, the mental habit of imagining paths not taken. And it intensifies as you age because the felt sense of available paths genuinely does narrow. Not because the world closes, but because choices accumulate. Every yes is 100 no's, and your brain knows this. So nostalgia isn't just wishing for the past, it's wishing for a version of yourself that still had all the options. It's grieving the unlived versions of your life. That's why it feels like grief even when nothing bad happened. Because something ended. Possibility itself ended. Or at least a particular constellation of it. So what do you do with all this? The honest answer? Maybe nothing. Not everything that's true about how your brain works requires an action plan. But here's what research does suggest. Nostalgia, when engaged with consciously, has measurable psychological benefits. Routledge and his colleagues found that people who were prompted to reflect nostalgically and then asked to identify themes in those memories reported significantly higher levels of meaning and purpose afterward. Not because the past was being avoided, because the past was being used. The question isn't, why do I miss something I wasn't even happy in? The question is, what does my nostalgia tell me about what I'm actually looking for right now? If you're nostalgic for the freedom of being 20,
Maybe what you're missing isn't being 20. Maybe you're missing permission to move more freely in your current life. If you're nostalgic for a specific friend group, maybe what's missing isn't those people. Maybe what's missing is being genuinely known by someone right now. Nostalgia is a signal, not a destination. Your brain is pointing at something with the past, but what it's pointing at exists in the present tense.
You're still thinking about that time, the summer, the place, the version of your life that wasn't actually that great. But now you know what's happening. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing something ancient and human, reaching backward to find the thread, trying to stitch together the person you were and the person you're becoming, using the past as a compass for the present. Johannes Hofer thought it was a disease. 21st century neuroscience says it's a feature. And maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Maybe nostalgia is only a problem when you stop there, when you mistake the signal for the destination, when you spend so much time looking left that you forget you're allowed to walk.
You weren't even that happy back then, and your brain knew it. It just also knew something you're only starting to figure out, that the past isn't something you leave behind, it's something you carry forward. And how you carry it, that's up to you.